Hello and welcome to Indus News. Live from Islamabad, I'm NILE Shuja, and these are the headlines. Pakistan's National Security Advisor has expressed concern over the worsening situation in Afghanistan, terming it extremely bad and out of Pakistan's control. Briefing lawmakers, Moeed Yusuf warned of a risk of an attack by Tehreek-e-Taliban, who he said could enter Pakistan under the guise of refugees. He told them that the Taliban are not present in Pakistan as of now, terming the reports Indian propaganda. He said regional stability hinges on peace in Afghanistan, where violence has spiked in recent days as foreign troops withdraw. Indian troops have martyred another civilian in occupied Jammu and Kashmir's Rajouri district. This is the second killing in the Sundarbani area of the same district in the past 24 hours. The occupying troops have now killed 6 civilians since yesterday. In Bangladesh, at least 52 people have died after a massive fire raged through a factory in Naryanganj, east of Dhaka. Authorities say 50 others are injured and many people are feared to be trapped, so the death toll may rise. In Pakistan, authorities have warned that there are clear signs of a fourth coronavirus wave starting in the country. Poor compliance with SOPs and the spread of the Delta variant, first identified in India, have been blamed for the looming fourth wave. Several countries are also reimposing restrictions over the rise of infections due to the Delta variant. Globally, there are now more than 4 million deaths and over 185 million infections. For more news and details, stay tuned. We'll be back after a short break. Welcome back. Pakistan's National Security Advisor has expressed concern over the worsening situation in Afghanistan, terming it extremely bad and out of Pakistan's control. Briefing lawmakers, Moeed Yusuf warned of a risk of an attack by Tehreek-e-Taliban, who he said could enter Pakistan under the guise of refugees. He told lawmakers that the Taliban are not present in Pakistan as of now, terming the reports Indian propaganda. He said regional stability hinges on peace in Afghanistan, where violence has spiked in recent days as foreign troops withdraw. He reiterated that the Afghan government needs to work on improving ties with Pakistan if it wants peace there. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi also briefed lawmakers, saying Pakistan intends to suggest power sharing in Afghanistan to avoid a civil war. He said holding Pakistan responsible for the worsening situation in Afghanistan is not fair. The Taliban say they are free to attack administrative centers in Afghanistan, as they made no promise to the U.S. to leave them alone. At a news conference in Moscow, Taliban representatives said they are discussing a possible ceasefire with Kabul.
In comments carried by Russian media, the fighters said they will halt their offensive if the Doha talks are successful. The group said it controls over 85% of Afghan territory, but guaranteed that Afghanistan will never be used against other countries. Taliban spokesperson Shahabuddin Dilawar said the captured border crossings are functioning as normal. Meanwhile, Moscow noted that the Taliban currently control more than 2/3 of the Afghan-Tajikistan border. Whereas the World Health Organization says at least 56 civilians have been killed in Afghanistan in the last week alone.
For more on this, we're joined by Mr. James Dorsey, a political analyst from Singapore. Thank you so much for speaking to Indus News, Mr. Dorsey. Now, regional countries like Uzbekistan, Pakistan, and others had to suffer through decades of insurgency because of the last time U.S. left Afghanistan in such a hurry. How vulnerable are these states, and now as a similar, if not worse, situation is brewing?
Look, I think that the Afghanistan's neighbors, including the Central Asian states, but also including China, are nervous because they're not quite clear what's going to happen in Afghanistan. One thing is the Taliban takeover, which has its own problems, but also the threat of continued violence between various militant groups and resistance to militant groups in Afghanistan. And so what you've seen over the last couple of weeks, months maybe, is that the Taliban, aware that they are making progress and convinced that ultimately the government in Kabul will fall, are trying to reassure their neighbors, particularly first and foremost the Chinese, because of past links between Afghanistan and Uyghur militants.
Now, Mr. Dorsey, President Biden said that the United States achieved its objectives, including eliminating al-Qaeda's threat from Afghanistan. But a recent UN report claims otherwise. What are the reasons for this disagreement?
Well, I think the cup is half full or half empty. What is clear is that the Americans are leaving Afghanistan in limbo. It's not clear what the political regime will be and what that political regime will do. Having said that, fact of the matter is that Taliban was never really happy with al-Qaeda, certainly post-2001 in Afghanistan. And the Taliban increasingly have been at odds and have fought al-Qaeda. Plus that they have promised, and I think one should take that promise serious, that they are not going to be hosting jihadist groups in Afghanistan, that they would either be part of the government or be the government.
Mr. Dorsey, now considering the pace and magnitude of Taliban victories of key areas, do you agree with President Biden that the Afghan forces are capable of defeating the Taliban?
Well, I think that they still have to prove that. If you look at recent Taliban advances, I think that calls the capability of the Afghan forces into question. Now, keep in mind that with the exception of Kunduz, most of those advances have been in rural areas, not in highly populated urban areas. So we will have to see how that, once the Taliban try to take major urban cities, how that's going to evolve.
Mr. James Dorsey, thank you for speaking to Indus News. Now moving on, Indian troops have martyred another civilian in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. This pushes the death toll in the Sundarbani area of Rajouri district to 2. The occupying troops have now killed 6 civilians in the last 24 hours. They also carried out operations in the Pulwama and Kulgam districts. The authorities have also suspended internet services in these areas. Rights groups say that at least 400 Kashmiris have been killed by the Indian military since August 2019. In Bangladesh, at least 52 people have died after a massive fire raged through a factory in Naryanganj, east of Dhaka. Authorities say 50 others are injured and many people are feared to be trapped, so the death toll may rise. Officials say an investigation has been launched into the cause of the inferno. A fire department official said highly flammable chemicals and plastics had been stockpiled inside. Emergency services are still battling to put out the fire on the 5th and 6th floors after 24 hours. In Haiti, police say a hit squad composed of Colombians and Haitian Americans assassinated President Jovenel Moïse. Police Chief Leon Charles says 17 attackers, including 2 Americans, have been captured. In a briefing, he said 3 assailants were killed and 8 are still on the run. Colombia's government says at least 6 members of the alleged squad appear to be retired members of its military. Colombian Defense Minister Diego Molano also pledged to assist Haiti in its investigative efforts. Meanwhile, the United States State Department said that it could not confirm if any of its citizens had been detained. In a press briefing, spokesperson Ned Price said Washington is responding to a request from Port-au-Prince for investigative assistance. A controversial 2018 law that defines Israel as the nation-state of only Jewish people has been upheld by the Supreme Court. The court rejected claims by opponents that it discriminates against minorities. The law says fulfilling the right to national self-determination in Israel is unique to the Jewish people. The nation-state law also downgraded Arabic from an official language to one with special status. A Palestinian rights group, Adala, tried to overturn the law, saying it excludes those who do not belong to the majority. The The group said it will continue to work internationally to expose the discriminatory and the racist nature of the law. Brazil's COVID-19 death toll has exceeded 530,000 with more than 1,600 fatalities overnight. South Korea is raising restrictions to the highest level after new daily cases hit a record for a second straight day. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 4 million lives and has infected over 185 million others. More in this report.
Surging cases of the highly infectious Indian Delta variant and the return of restrictions are threatening the revival of pandemic-hit global economy. Canada has decided to continue restricting unvaccinated foreign tourists from entering the country, while New Zealand has delayed flights from Australia's New South Wales region after the outbreak in Sydney worsened. Australian authorities have also warned that a 3-week lockdown may be extended as the city reported its biggest rise in cases for the year.
New South Wales is facing the biggest challenge we have faced since the pandemic started. And I don't say that lightly. I don't say that lightly. And unless there is a dramatic change, unless there's a dramatic turnaround in the numbers, I can't see how we'd be in a position to ease restrictions by next Friday. And that is why all of us need to work together.
Cuba has claimed its two-shot Soberana 2 vaccine has proven 91.2% effective in late-stage clinical trials. Meanwhile, Pfizer says it plans to ask U.S. regulators to authorize a booster dose of its vaccine over the spread of the Indian Delta variant. But the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention say the fully vaccinated Americans do not need a booster shot at this time. They, however, have warned that the daily COVID-19 cases in America have increased 11% from last week.
We are starting to see some new and concerning trends. Simply put, in areas of low vaccination coverage, cases and hospitalizations are up. Further, we are seeing some small clusters and larger outbreaks of COVID-19 in locations such as camps and community events where proper, hard-learned prevention strategies are not enforced and the virus is readily able to thrive.
The Global Vaccine Distribution Scheme, COVAX, says it aims to deliver 520 million doses to Africa this year. In Russia, Moscow's mayor said the situation is gradually stabilizing in Russia after a surge driven by the Indian strain, but the new daily cases remain high nationwide. Qatar, meanwhile, has announced to resume issuing visas to foreigners in line with the new travel and return policies.
In Pakistan, COVID-19 has claimed 25 more lives overnight. The health ministry says the death toll has reached 22,520. The ministry said the virus has infected over 1,700 people in the past 24 hours. It also warned that there are clear signs of a fourth coronavirus wave starting in the country. The caseload has crossed 969,000 with more than 911,000 people recovered. The ministry said there are over 35,000 active cases, of which more than 1,900 are critical. Meanwhile, over 19 million vaccine doses have been administered in the country so far. Pakistan is marking the 54th death anniversary of the mother of the nation, Fatima Jinnah. She was the younger sister of Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan. A dentist by profession, Jinnah joined the struggle for a separate Muslim homeland. She was one of the leading founders of the freedom movement. Jinnah played an active role in making the dream of Pakistan a reality. In a statement, Pakistan's foreign ministry paid tribute for her passionate support of civil rights, while Rights Minister Shireen Mazari called her an icon and a role model for women. The Lady of Pakistan died in 1967 due to a heart attack and was buried beside her brother's grave in Karachi. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. The streets of New York City are flooded after the tropical storm ELSA hit the East Coast. Heavy rainfall and thunderstorms left roads and subway stations inundated by water. The National Hurricane Center says ELSA is expected to weaken to a post-tropical cyclone by Friday night. The Weather Service has forecasted possible tornadoes in the eastern Carolinas and southeastern Virginia. Tropical storm warnings are in effect in parts of the East Coast as far as North Massachusetts. At least 10 people have died after a windstorm leveled scores of houses in Gambia's western districts. The National Disaster Management Authority said more than 1,500 people have been displaced. Entire families wandered around the outskirts of the capital, Banjul, in search of shelter. The heavy winds, rain, and flooding also damaged utility infrastructure. Many of the African nation's coastal urban areas remain without electricity or running water in the aftermath of the storm. The UN Security Council has backed African Union mediation efforts between Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan. It urged the parties to resume talks in a dispute over the operation of a giant hydropower dam on the Blue Nile. In an open session, the U.S. called for urgently resuming talks under the leadership of the African Union. Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield asserted that the bloc is the most appropriate venue to address this dispute. Egypt and Sudan have both called on the Security Council to help resolve the dispute, but Addis Ababa is opposed to any Security Council involvement and wants the AU to lead instead. The UN rapporteur has called for open dialogue between the Belgium government and migrants on hunger strike. Hundreds of migrants are on a hunger strike for 7 weeks in an attempt to force authorities to give them the right to work. UN rapporteur on extreme poverty and human rights Oliver de Schutter met with strikers in Brussels church. Schutter hoped that the government could provide migrants with a temporary right to work. He noted that authorities could establish a mechanism to allow permanent work to those who are integrated into the community. Migrants say there are multiple applications for the right to remain in the country have been turned down. The Belgium government says that it won't issue blanket permission to work outside the current migration rules. Turkey says it is ready to extend its support and expertise on migration to Lithuania. The statement comes after Lithuania accused Belarus of flying in immigrants from abroad to send to the European Union. Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu addressed a news conference in Helsinki, Finland. Cavusoglu said that he had discussed the issue with his Lithuanian counterpart, Gabrielius Landsbergis, in Vilnius. He noted that it should be determined whether migrants were flying to Belarus on their own, as they cannot fly without valid passports. For his part, Landsbergis said that a large number of the migrants had come from Turkey. Meanwhile, Lithuania says that it has started building a barrier along its border with Belarus. Army spokesperson said the first stretch will run 500 meters in length and measure 1.8 meters high. More than 8 billion people could be at risk of malaria and dengue fever by 2080. A new study predicts if greenhouse gas emissions continue to rise unabated, it could lengthen transmission seasons of both the diseases. The study published in the Lancet Planetary Health Journal says up to 4.7 billion more people could be threatened by the world's two most prominent mosquito-borne diseases. Researchers predict if emission levels continue to rise at current rates, the effect on global temperatures could lengthen transmission seasons. It could prolong this season by more than a month for malaria and 4 months for dengue over the next 50 years. The research strongly suggests that reducing greenhouse gas emissions could prevent millions of people from contracting malaria or dengue. It says action to limit global temperature increases well below 2 centigrade must continue. A new OXFAM report shows the number of people dying from hunger rose 6-fold in the past year. At least 11 people die every minute from hunger and malnutrition. The global charity said overall 155 million people around the world are now living in crisis levels of food insecurity. It said wars, COVID-19, and climate change are fueling the world's hunger crisis. Buckingham Palace has opened its garden to visitors, allowing the public to explore Queen Elizabeth's official residence for the first time. In the heart of London, people will be able to walk through the 39-acre garden until September. Wardens will be on hand to provide talks, while arts and craft activities will be available for children. Guests will also have the rare opportunity to picnic on one of the lawns as part of their visit. The garden's landscape dates back to the 1820s when King George IV converted Buckingham House into a palace. There are more than 1,000 trees on the site and 320 different wildflowers and grasses. In Croatia, a sculptor dedicates his time to tracing enormous geometrical sand artworks that only last while the tide is out. More about his disappearing art in this report.
Every year at the JINNAH'S Art Festival in Croatia, Nikola Foller draws patterns in the sands of the Neretva River Delta. He says the opportunities for creativity never end, as the next day a new surface is available to draw on when the waves recede. Foller says his inspiration comes from different traditions with sacred geometry.
I was drawing here when the tide receded. I have 3.5 hours at my disposal now that the tide is coming. I made circles. My inspiration comes from the traditions of sacred geometry around the world, the Christian, Buddhist, Hindu ones. There are plenty of ideas, but time is limited.
The artist plans to organize his own sand art festival on the Neretva River Delta, dedicated to temporary artwork.
Sandwriting is very easy to do. Anyone can do it. We plan to include children in the fall. We will launch a separate festival that will be based only on sand, the Sand Art Neretva. It will be in September at full moon.
JINNAH'S Festival Director Ivan Anchet said Foller delights attendees with his work every year. The art festival includes music, mural paintings and workshops for children, with artists participating from across Europe.
A trove of love letters that American poet SYLVIA Plath wrote to her British husband, fellow poet Ted Hughes, is up for auction at Sotheby's.
Plath and Hughes married in 1956, and their relationship was as tumultuous as it was passionate. Her letters to Hughes explore her agony of separation from him while she was studying at Cambridge. The sale comprises 55 lots and comes directly from the collection of Sylvia's daughter, Frida Hughes.
So we're very privileged to be offering a collection of material from Sylvia Plath, coming from her daughter, Frida Hughes, including the wonderful love letters written by her to her husband.
The sale also includes a deck of tarot cards given to Plath by Hughes for her birthday and a striking ink portrait drawn by Plath during the couple's honeymoon in Ben Durham.
We have published estimates for the various items, so the photograph album is estimated at £30,000 to £50,000, for example. But these are such unique items that it is very hard to predict how the bidding will go, and we think that there will be very strong interest. And
their wedding rings, family recipes and photo albums are also part of the auction. The items will be sold at Sotheby's in London from July 9 to 21.
While Haute Couture Week has seen the return of in-person shows as lockdown restrictions ease in France, some brands like Fendi have opted for digital presentations. More in this report.
Italian fashion house Fendi used soft colors and played with stone-like illusions for its haute couture collection. Designer Kim Jones said he looked to late Italian film director Pier Paolo Pasolini's depictions of Rome for inspiration. He presented the line digitally with a film by Italian director Luca Guadagnino. Models including Kate Moss and her daughter Lila Grace wore embroidered dresses, satin marble-like gowns, embellished jackets, and mosaic-like designs. The British designer stuck to a mainly neutral color palette, showing plenty of white, cream, and different shades of brown. Jones, also at the helm of men's wear at French fashion house Dior, is artistic director for women's wear and couture at Fendi, part of luxury conglomerate LVMH.
The European Union says the United Kingdom is liable to pay $56.2 billion as part of the post-Brexit settlement. The European Union's consolidated budget report for 2020 says the money is owed under a series of articles. The report read an initial amount of $8.04 billion is due for payment in 2021, with the remainder to be paid later. The $56.2 billion amount is significantly higher than expected. The UK's Office for Budget Responsibility predicted that the bill would amount to $49 billion. The tension between the two sides has mounted over trade arrangements for Northern Ireland. Amazon has closed 340 online stores operated by one of its largest Chinese realtors in the first half of this year. Shenzhen-listed parent Tiza Information Industry estimated the realtor's sale this year to be reduced by 40 to 60%. Tiz said that the stores run by Shenzhen Yuko Keshu Technology were shut down for allegedly violating Amazon's rules. It said the affected stores made up of 30% of Yokeshu's total retail presence on the platform. In its filing, the company said more than $20 million of Yokeshu's funds have been frozen. The crackdown affected products with the tag Made in China sold on Amazon. Most shares in the Asia-Pacific have fallen as COVID-19 worries survivorness research the data variant in the region. Sold KOSPI and the ASX 200 in Australia have fallen nearly 1%. Japan's Nikkei 225 has also dipped over 0.5%. And now it's time to take a look at the weather from around the world. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at indus.news.